Hello, everyone. This is Michael from the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts, on Thursday, August 7th, and I'm reading from the Providence Journal. First, the weather. Clouds and sun today. Smoke from wildfires in Canada can create reduced air quality. It'll be a high of 79 and a low of 55. For tomorrow, August 8th, it'll be a high of 79 and a low of 55, mostly sunny and pleasant. On Saturday, sunny all day, high of 80 and a low of 60. On Sunday, high of 84, a low of 68, partly sunny. On Monday, August 11th, it's going up to 90, mostly sunny and hot, with a high of 90 and a low of 69. And now for the news. First article. Famiglietti rolls to win in special election. Democrat to succeed Ruggiero in Rhode Island Senate. An article by Patrick Anderson. Democrat Stefano Famiglietti cruised to victory in the special election to succeed the late Dominic Ruggiero in the Rhode Island State Senate, defeating Republican Alex Assermley. Famiglietti, a North Providence town councilman, had 83% of the vote to 16% for Assermley, according to unofficial results from the State Board of Elections. Famiglietti's victory keeps State Senate District 4, which Ruggiero represented since 1984, under Democratic control. Assermley, an attorney like Famiglietti, faced an uphill battle. Not only have Democrats held the seat for many decades, but Famiglietti had a financial advantage and the backing of Senate leadership. The district favored 2024 Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris over Republican nominee Donald Trump by 11 points last November. Quote, his deep roots in the community and clear understanding of the priorities of District 4 have resonated with voters, and his commitment to public service is a strong reflection of these values exemplified by the Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, end quote, a news release from the Senate's top 3 Democrats said. Famiglietti beat 3 Democrats in the special primary election in July. Senate District 4 represents most of North Providence and a slice of northwestern Providence. Quote, I am grateful for the opportunity to work on the state level to support the citizens of District 4. Just as when I was on the North Providence Town Council, my door will always be open, and I will never forget that I'm in the Senate to work on behalf of the people of North Providence and Providence, end quote, Famiglietti said in a Senate leadership news release. End of article. Next article. Royal treatment. 2 Newport mansions depict an English castle in The Gilded Age by HBO. An article by Paul Edward Parker. Newport. When Gladys, a main character in HBO's The Gilded Age, first arrives at the English estate of her new husband, the Duke of Buckingham, she remarks how long the carriage ride has been. Are we nearly there? She asked the Duke in the opening scene of Season 3's Episode 5. Quote, we've been crossing the estate for the past half hour, the Duke informs her. Sidmouth Castle, the Duke's estate, is on such a grander scale than any residence Gladys has known in Gilded Age Manhattan and Newport that HBO had to use 6 separate properties, including 2 Newport mansions, to portray Gladys's new home. The 2 Newport properties that Julian Fellows used to create Sidmouth Castle were Ochre Court, built as a summer residence for the family of real estate mogul Ogden Goulet, whose heirs donated it to what is now Salve Regina University, which uses it as the main administration building, and Belcourt, built as a bachelor home for divorced banker Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, which is now owned by Carolyn Rafaelian, former chief executive of a jewelry company, Alex and Annie. While the Gilded Age production designer sought to convey the sheer scale and isolation of living in an English estate, Belcourt's appearance was probably the intimate portrayal of Sidmouth Castle. One of Belcourt's drawing rooms was used as Gladys's bedroom, according to David Betancourt, manager of Belcourt, who described his position, quote, if it were the Gilded Age, I'd be the butler, end quote. Gladys's bedroom is where her mother, Bertha Russell, visiting her homesick daughter, gives her advice to stand up for herself and stand up to the Duke's Duke's sister, Lady Sarah. Quote, "You must convince him his welfare is as safe in your hands as it is in hers," end quote, Bertha says in episode 6. Quote, "You're not a fool, Gladys. In this setup, you outrank Lady Sarah. Just make sure everyone knows it," end quote. The Belcourt Mansion has a connection to the character Bertha Russell, who is modeled after real-life Newport Gilded Age summer resident Alva Vanderbilt. After Alva divorced William K. Vanderbilt in 1895, she married Oliver Belmont, moved to his bachelor quarters, and remodeled it into the Belcourt that is familiar today. Betancourt declined to say how much the production paid to use Belcourt. Season 3 was not Belcourt's first time in the Gilded Age limelight. It was one of several houses used to film scenes inside Mrs. Astor's Newport house. How was Salve Regina University's Ochre Court used in the Gilded Age? Ochre Court had a more varied role in Season 3, The Gilded Age, than Belcourt did. Perhaps the most striking use of Ochre Court is the university's state dining room, which was used for dinner scenes, including a memorable one when Gladys turns the tables on Lady Sarah, who has risen to leave the room ahead of Duchess Gladys. "Sarah, are you quite well?" Gladys asks, halting all conversation in the ornate room. After Sarah asks why she shouldn't be, Gladys says, "I thought when you stood without waiting for me, you must be ill," end quote, forcing Sarah to sheepishly return to her seat. The state dining room was a case of third season's charm, according to the university events director Johanna Monicalvano, who served as liaison to the show. Fellows, scouting locations for the season in 2019, fell in love with the dining room and started discussions to use it when COVID-19 hit. Because of social distancing rules, the university had to open up space and use the dining room as a classroom, Monicalvano said. But fellows had not forgotten the room when Season 3 rolled around. Other Season 3 locations filmed at Ochre Court as Sidmouth Castle include the front entrance where carriages arrive at and depart from Sidmouth Castle, the third-floor hallway above the Great Hall itself. The university declined to say how much it was paid for use of the building, but it didn't hesitate to rave about the chance to share Ochre Court with the HBO audience. Quote, "We're happy that more people are able to see how beautiful it is," said Monsi Villano. Quote, "The project also gave our students opportunities for experiential learning. Some of our film students were able to go on set to observe the production, and others participated as extras. They were thrilled to be on real sets on an Emmy award-winning show." If you want to visit Belcourt, guided tours are offered Fridays through Sundays with a full-price adult tour costing $20. Details are available on the house website, belcourt.com. If you want to visit Ochre Court, Newport's Cliff Walk passes right by Ochre Court and offers fantastic views of the mansion's exterior. The grounds and the first floor are open to the public, and the building is rented out as a wedding venue and conference facility, so you might just get invited to a wedding there. Will HBO be coming back to Ochre Court or Belcourt for the Gilded Age? It's too soon to tell where the show will film for its recently announced Season 4, but both properties would like to be on the list. "They're welcome back any time," said Belcourt's Betancourt. Quote, "Working with HBO is a great experience," said Salve's Monsi Villano. We love seeing them bring in incredibly detailed furnishings and objects to make the period look accurate. It was a super interesting and true pleasure. What are all the properties used in the Gilded Age portrayal of Sidmouth Castle? In addition to the interior of Belmont Court and the interior and exterior of Ochre Court, the Gilded Age uses the following locations to portray Sidmouth, according to a spokesman for HBO. The interior and exterior shots of Ochre Court and Newport, interior shots of Belcourt and Newport, interior shots of Hempstead House, also called the Guggenheim Estate on Long Island in Sands Point, New York, Exterior shots at Westbury House at Old Westbury Gardens on Long Island in Old Westbury, New York. Exterior shots of the bridge at Stourhead in Wiltshire, England. And exterior shots of the Longleat House in Wiltshire, England. End of article. Next article, Garden City Center will not renew Newport Creamery's lease. An article by Wheeler Copperwaite in the Providence Journal. Cranston, Newport Creamery will need to be out of its standalone restaurant in Garden City Center by December 2026, after the mall refused to renew the restaurant's lease. Quote, we've been trying to get more time on our lease for the last 5 years, and they kept on saying, maybe, we don't know, end quote, Newport Creamery spokesman and Jan Company's Vice President Janice Matthews said. Quote, we've gone through multiple mall management companies, and then we're hearing through the grapevine that they're planning to do something else with the site. So we called, and they told us that they're not renewing our lease, end quote. Newport Creamery's owners, the Jan Companies, had a 10-year lease at the Garden City Center and started trying to renew the lease about halfway through. Quote, we're out of options on our lease, she said. Newport Creamery still has a year and a half in the space. It is not one, if not the oldest tenant in Garden City, having opened 14 years after the mall opened. When it closes in 2026, it will have been there for 65 years. The location probably does a little better than most other Newport Creamery sites, Matthews said. It's all relative, she said. The better the site, the more rent you pay. The company is scoping out real estate in Cranston looking for a possible new location that is not too close to its restaurant neighboring Warwick. We're very hopeful, and we're checking with all the major landlords in town to see if they have anything, Matthews said. We've been looking at a lot of different places of real estate. If Newport Creamery finds anywhere, build-out time will be about a year. Quote, it's absolutely crazy expensive for restaurant space, she said. If Newport Creamery finds a new space in the next 6 months, they could feasibly move in before their lease is up. Quote, we've been in the restaurant business for over 50 years, so we can move quick, end quote, she said. What will replace Newport Creamery at the Garden City Center? Garden City Center has not responded to requests for comment, but Matthews said she was told that no one has signed a lease for the Newport Creamery space yet. Quote, that's what they told us, but I don't know, she said. Quote, I have a feeling that they would never be telling us we have to move unless they had a new person to go in there, end quote. Another Wally Wieners fiasco? In a news release, Representative Charlene Lima, Democrat of Cranston and Providence, wrote that she and Cranston Councilman Andy Andujar will be looking to see if there are any tax breaks that can be taken away from the mall. If WS Development thinks they can pull a Wally Wieners fiasco in Cranston, they are gravely mistaken, she wrote in a news release. Councilman Andujar and I will fight them by any means necessary. That, quote, fiasco, end quote, is the closure of Joe Mazzilli's old canteen in Federal Hill and its replacement with Wally Wieners, which serves Saugy Wieners and martinis, after owner Sal Marzilli put the restaurant up for sale in 2022 because he wanted to retire. Lima also wrote that the mall owner, WS Development, has shown no concern for the displacement of small businesses. Garden City Center has, quote, regressed from the care and dedication shown by the old owners. Under WS Development and its CEO, Jeremy Sklar, there had been an uptick in crimes and violent behavior in Garden City, Lima alleged, calling for legislation to require a police detail whenever the mall is open. If WS Development thinks they can terminate an iconic Newport Creamery and bring in a foreign-based company like Apple without a fight, think again, Lima wrote. She would be fine with locating an Apple store rumored to be the new tenant elsewhere in the mall, she wrote. That would likely mean poaching them from Providence Place. We're very hopeful and we're checking with all the major landlords in town to see if they have anything. We've been looking at a lot of different pieces of real estate, said Janice Matthews, Company's vice president. End of article. Next article, lane restrictions coming to Route 2 under Route 37, an article by Wheeler Copperwaite in the Providence Journal. Cranston. Route 2, New London Avenue in Cranston will be down to one lane in each direction as it goes under Route 37, a move that will last until mid-November 2025. Route 2 will be down to one lane in each direction starting on August 15th as crews begin work to demolish the Route 37 bridge that goes over Route 2. The ramps and exits at the interchange on Route 37 will stay open, but the lanes will be narrow and will shift, and there will be less distance for merging, according to a news release from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. Sometime in November, work on the demolition of the bridge will start, bringing more closures. The Route 37 bridge replacement is part of a larger $143 million project to repair or replace bridges on Route 37. Route 37 is a main artery in the state with a daily vehicle count of 42,000, quote, one of the state's busiest corridors, according to the news release. Route 37 links Cranston and Warwick, the interstates, and the airport, a critical east-west freeway in central Rhode Island. End of article. Next article. Bat at Beavertail State Park tests positive for rabies. An article in the Providence Journal from the USA Today Network. An injured bat found at Beavertail State Park in Jamestown on July 30th tested positive for rabies. The Rhode Island Department of Health is alerting the public that a worker found the rabid bat near the hose spigot on the lighthouse building, according to a news release. The bat was taken to a wildlife rehabilitation facility and later euthanized when staff noticed that the bat was displaying symptoms of rabies. It was submitted for testing to the Rhode Island Department of Health State Health Laboratories on August 1st. What we know about rabies. Rabies is a fatal disease if it's not treated before the onset of symptoms, according to the release. Anyone who may have had direct contact with the bat should immediately call the Rhode Island Department of Health Center for Acute Infectious Disease Epidemiology at 401-222-2577, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30, or 401-276-8046 after hours. Rhode Island Department of Health should also be contacted if a pet may have contacted with this bat. The rabies virus infects the central nervous system. If a person does not receive the appropriate medical care after a rabies exposure, the virus can cause disease in the brain, ultimately resulting in death. Rabies treatment must be started as soon as possible after the exposure. All dogs, cats, and ferrets are required by state law to have current vaccination against rabies. Vaccination of pets prevents them from contracting rabies and prevents people from being exposed to rabies through their pets. How to prevent rabies? To prevent rabies, people should, quote, make sure all dogs, cats, and ferrets are up to date on rabies vaccinations. Avoid all contact with and do not feed stray or free-roaming domestic animals. Avoid all contact with and do not feed wild animals. Do not feed your animals outdoors, as this will attract other animals. This is especially dangerous when feeding large numbers of free-roaming cats. Protect your pets by always maintaining control. Walk dogs on a leash or let them play in a fenced yard, and do not let pets wander unsupervised. Report all animal bites to your city or town's animal control officer. Secure all garbage cans so wild animals cannot scavenge for food. For further information, see health.ri.gov/rabies. End of article. Next article. Filmmaker Dee Resendez calls for help in putting a voice to history. An article by Jack Perry in the Providence Journal. Filmmaker Christian Dee Resendez needed a few good voices, or more importantly, a few authentic voices. De Resendez is facing a tight deadline for the completion of the 9th episode of his 11-episode documentary series, Slatersville, America's First Mill Village. He's scheduled to preview the episode on Labor Day at the Museum of Work and Culture in Woonsocket. Though much of the series, De Resendez has relied on historic written material and has used voiceover actors to help tell his story on film. Pulling together a sequence about the Vietnam War for Episode 9, De Resendez realized he needed several different voices. "I'm trying to hear a cacophony of voices," De Resendez said. On Tuesday, August 5th, he posted on Facebook about his need to cast actors for the following voices. 1. Male, age 23. 2. Reporter over age 30, preferably female, several lines to read. 3. Mother, mid-50s, 1 or 2 lines, angry. 4. Mother, mid-50s, 1 or 2 lines, concerned. 5. Vietnam War veteran, male, 30s, 1 or 2 lines. 6. War veteran, number 2, male, 30s, 1 or 2 lines. The roles don't pay, but De Resendez received a quick response. On the morning of Wednesday, August 6th, he said, quote, "It's almost fully cast. He plans to record the roles this weekend. There are people who just want to be part of it," he said. Though the first 8 episodes, the documentary has featured dozens of, quote, voice parts, according to De Resendez. A lot of them are actors. Some of them are locals who just have good voices or the right kind of voice, he said. Professional voiceover artists who might be great in commercials can have, quote, over-prepared voices where everything is perfect, De Resendez said. Usually you want someone or something more reflective. De Resendez expects that he will need voice actors for his final 2 episodes, and he might put out another call. Are you ready? End of article. Final article. Advocates, voting rights under siege. As landmark law turns 60, GOP actions stir fears. An article by Deborah Barfield Berry. Washington. On the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, a law that promised millions of Americans the power to vote, civil rights lawyers and scholars warn those rights are again in danger. The Trump administration and some Republican-led legislatures are working to change voting rights protections that have stood for decades. Republicans say they're protecting against voter fraud and ensuring the integrity of election systems. Voting rights advocates say they're undermining the promises of the act and threatening the American system itself. Quote, "Democracy is in crisis," said Mark Morial, president of the National Urban League, a civil rights organization. Quote, 60 years after the Voting Rights Act transformed America's democracy, the promise is again under threat. Voting rights advocates, experts, and lawmakers were marking the August 6th anniversary with panels and programs. They pressed Congress to support federal voting rights legislation named after the late civil rights icon, U.S. Representative John Lewis of Georgia. The law helps all voters, not just black voters, and not just those in the South, said Janai Nelson, president and director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Quote, "I'm hopeful that the American people will see how important those protections are for all of us," end quote, said Nelson, whose organization has challenged restrictive voting bills in the courts. Quote, "I think that many people felt that this law was there because of the South, and the South only was a rogue actor. In the decades since the Voting Rights Act was signed into law on August 6, 1965, by President Lyndon B. Johnson, civil rights activists said it has helped increase the number of black voters and in some places led to the election of record numbers of black leaders. Quote, "It needs to be recognized for what it's achieved," said Cortland Cox, a veteran of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, noting that there are currently black mayors in several major cities, including Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and New York. Voting rights advocates also noted the historic bid of Kamala Harris, who was the first woman to serve as vice president and in 2024 became the first woman of African American and Asian American descent to run for president. They point to Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, a Democratic congressional leader, and the influential U.S. Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina. At one point in 2025, a record number of black women served in state legislatures. According to a recent report by the Higher Heights and the Center for Women in Politics at Rutgers University. There's more to do, said Cox. The more to do is not about voting, it's about exercising power. 6 decades ago, civil rights activists braved violence to mobilize black people, particularly in the South, to register and vote. Those efforts led to the Voting Rights Act, often called the crown jewel of the civil rights movement, which helped protect against discriminatory laws, including some that required black voters to pass literacy tests or pay poll taxes to vote. The act was probably more important than anything that happened in the movement, Cox said. At best, civil rights gave you access, he said. Voting rights gave you power. For years, the act had mostly had bipartisan congressional support, including when it was reauthorized in 2006. But more recent voting rights legislation, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, have stalled in Congress along party lines. The bill would, among other things, restore provisions of the Voting Act requiring approval for election changes. I am very disappointed with the ways in which Congress keeps black people on the hamster wheel to get this thing renewed, end quote, said Dan Broild, Associate Professor of African American History at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Quote, it's going to take some people who believe in democracy and believe in not abridging people's right to vote. Civil rights leaders are also concerned about other efforts to dilute the law and restrict access to the polls in some states. Several states proposed more restrictive laws soon after the United States Supreme Court Shelby versus Holder ruling in 2013 eliminated a provision of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and required jurisdictions with a history of discrimination to get federal approval before making election changes. Advocates believe the backlash is a response, at least in part, to increasing black political power and the 2008 election of Barack Obama, the nation's first black president. It's hard for people to pay attention in the midst of this chaos, said Fatima Koss-Graves, president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center. Koss-Graves and other activists point to what they call efforts by the Trump administration to dismantle some civil rights gains. Meanwhile, she said people should push back against the Republican SAVE Act. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility would, among other things, require voters to show proof of citizenship in person for federal elections. Non-citizens are already blocked from voting in federal elections. It's going to be up to all of us to ensure that the SAVE Act continues to die in Congress and that we fight back, Koss-Graves said. Republicans defend the legislation. In order to preserve this republic, we must uphold what it means to be able to vote in a U.S. election, says Representative Chip Roy of Texas, the GOP sponsor of the bill, said in a statement. But Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey, slammed the GOP for trying to restrict access to representation, including efforts in Texas to redo the congressional district maps that would give Republicans an advantage. That is a direct assault on the voices of African Americans and a direct assault on all that John Lewis stood for, end quote, Booker said. Booker and other Senate Democrats recently ramped up efforts to focus on voting rights protections, including reintroducing the Lewis Voting Rights Bill. And that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening. See you soon.